In a hushed courtroom, a mother faces the greatest injustice of her life, while the woman who destroyed her family smirks, her victory all but guaranteed. Suddenly someone collapses, bringing the proceedings to a halt. But what looked like the end becomes the trial's most unexpected turning point. Behind the scenes, a secret investigation is uncovering a scheme so deep it threatens to ruin the reputations of everyone involved. And when the judge finally looks up, 4 words change the fate of everyone in that room. Before you watch this shocking turn of events, make sure you subscribe for more. Intense stories of justice, betrayal, and jaw-dropping revelations. The air in the courtroom was dense, heavy as a shroud. Every breath seemed to suck the last bit of hope from Eleanor. Her eyes, once bright and full of ambition, now carried the weight of sleepless nights and unshed tears. She watched the woman on the defendant's stand, a cool, elegant figure whose victorious smirk was a dagger in her soul. That woman, her ex-husband's mistress, was about to steal the last piece of her life. Her daughter, little Sophie, only 8 years old. Eleanor felt the floor disappear from under her. The house, the billion-dollar company she had, helped build from scratch, the dignity she once wore with pride. It had all been ripped away from her piece by piece. Now, the threat of losing Sophie was the final blow, an abyss opening up to swallow her whole. The emotional pressure was unbearable, a knot tightening in her throat, stealing her breath. The world spun, the voices became a distant hum, and darkness embraced her. Eleanor collapsed onto the cold courtroom floor, her consciousness fading. An even wider smile spread across her rival's lips, a silent triumph that echoed in the room. She believed she had won, that Eleanor's destruction was complete. But at that very moment, a crucial document reached the judge's hands, a woman known for her sharp eye and unyielding demeanor. Reading those pages would change the course of everything. In a few seconds, 4 words thundered through the room, cutting through the silence like a bolt of lightning. "You are under arrest." Eleanor's fall hadn't begun on that fateful day in court. Her story was a tapestry of ascent and betrayal, woven with threads of sweat, intelligence, and unwavering faith. Alongside Richard, her ex-husband, she had turned a dream into reality, building a tech empire from a cramped spare room. It was her algorithm, a work of genius that propelled the company to stardom, while Richard, with his undeniable charisma, became the public face of the venture. Their success seemed unshakable, their partnership indestructible. Until Veronica arrived, a charismatic executive with an easy smile and eyes that promised efficiency and innovation. Under the guise of restructuring the company, she got close to Richard, weaving a subtle web of manipulation. Slowly, Eleanor was isolated, her ideas questioned, her authority undermined. Within months, she was pushed out of leadership, her accounts frozen, her reputation tarnished. Veronica and Richard painted her as unstable, emotionally unbalanced, a shadow of her former self, all to justify their final, cruelest plan, to tear Sophie from her arms. 3 days before Eleanor fainted, Veronica took the witness stand. With impeccable posture and a carefully controlled voice, she described Eleanor as impulsive, erratic, and dangerous. Her narrative was flawless, mixing half-truths with skillful distortions, presenting forged documents that corroborated her version. Veronica positioned herself as the company's savior, the voice of reason amid the chaos she claimed Eleanor had created. Every sentence was a calculated blow, and the court, mesmerized by her performance, seemed to believe every word. When the psychiatric evaluation, obviously falsified, described her as unstable, Eleanor felt despair wash over her. She knew she was going to lose everything. But as Eleanor was breaking down, her young lawyer, an idealist who had believed in her innocence from the start, made an unexpected discovery. A parallel investigation, conducted with discretion and insight, revealed that Veronica was not who she claimed to be. The elegant, confident woman had a false identity and a history of conning tech executives in other states. She would create shell companies, infiltrate promising businesses, gain access to international accounts, and when no one was looking, drain everything. Exactly what she was doing right there at that moment, with Eleanor's life. The evidence was irrefutable. Recent transfers of nearly $100 million to Swiss bank accounts, international plane tickets purchased under a fake name, and detailed records of the imposter's criminal past. Upon returning to the courtroom, still pale from her collapse, Eleanor sat with a serenity no one expected. Her eyes, once filled with despair, now shone with a new determination. Her lawyer, with a discreet nod, handed the folder with the new evidence to the judge. The judge, known for her sternness and an eye that never forgave a lie, read every page carefully. Her expression hardened with each revelation. When she called Veronica to answer the accusations, the imposter tried to deny it, but the evidence was devastating. The travel ticket issued on the company's corporate card, her digital signature on the illegal transfers, everything incriminated her. When she tried to flee through a side door, she was stopped by the bailiffs. And then, in front of everyone, the judge pronounced the sentence that silenced the courtroom, echoing the words spoken just moments before. You are under arrest. Richard, who until then had been arrogant and sure of his victory, felt the ground crumble beneath him. He had been deceived, manipulated, used. He had handed over total control of the company and his own family life to a criminal. He broke down in silent sobs as the painful realization hit him. He had lost his money, his reputation, and, most importantly, his family. The judge, in a firm voice, nullified all previous testimony, threw out the forged psychiatric evaluation, froze the couple's assets, held Richard liable for negligence and attempted fraud, and granted full custody of the child to Eleanor. For the first time in months, Eleanor breathed a sigh of relief, a deep breath that released years of anguish. As she left the courthouse, still carrying the weight of so much suffering, she saw Sophie running toward her. Her daughter's tight hug was proof that despite having lost almost everything, she had gotten back what truly mattered. Her life would have to be rebuilt from scratch, but now she was free, with the truth on her side and her daughter's love as her guide. The journey would be long, but Eleanor knew that this time she wouldn't be alone. Sophie's hug was a balm for Eleanor's wounded soul. The scent of kids' shampoo and the softness of her daughter's hair were the anchor bringing her back to reality, a reality that, while still uncertain, now seemed less bleak. The crowd of reporters and onlookers outside the courthouse was a blur, their voices muffled by the sound of Eleanor's own heart, which was beating to a new rhythm, stronger and more hopeful. She knelt, cradling Sophie in her arms, feeling the warmth of the small body against hers. "Mommy's here, sweetie. Everything's going to be okay. Now," she whispered, her words choked with emotion. Sophie, with her big, curious eyes, looked up at her mother, not fully understanding the gravity of the events, but sensing the shift in the atmosphere, the lightness that wasn't there before. Her young attorney, Ethan Hayes, approached, a tired but victorious smile on his face. "We did it, Eleanor. We did it," he said, his voice hoarse. Ethan was more than a lawyer. He had become an ally, a friend, the only one who hadn't doubted her sanity when everyone else called her crazy. He helped her up, guiding them out of the courthouse, shielding them from the camera flashes and invasive questions. Life outside was a whirlwind. The news of Veronica's arrest and the dismissal of the charges against Eleanor spread like wildfire. The company, once a symbol of success, was now a stage for scandal. Richard, humiliated and exposed, went into seclusion, facing the consequences of his choices. His assets were frozen, his reputation in tatters, his family destroyed. The irony was cruel. He had lost everything Eleanor had warned him he would lose, but in a way he had never imagined. In the days that followed, Eleanor and Sophie took refuge in a small rented apartment, far from the spotlight. It was a modest but safe place, a harbor to rebuild their lives. Eleanor spent hours staring at the ceiling, reliving every detail of the betrayal, the humiliation, the fight. The pain was still there, an open wound, but now there was room for healing. She clung to Sophie, to the promise of a better future, to the certainty that the truth, however painful, had prevailed. Ethan visited them regularly, bringing updates on the case and offering support. He explained that the investigation into Veronica was deepening, revealing a complex network of fraud and false identities that spanned several countries. The woman who presented herself as Veronica was in fact a wanted international criminal, and her arrest opened up a slew of new investigations. The company, meanwhile, was undergoing an audit, and the full extent of the embezzlement caused by Veronica was still being calculated. "Richard is in shock," Ethan reported one day, as Sophie drew on the living room floor. "He can't believe he was so thoroughly deceived. It seems like it's finally sinking in." Eleanor just nodded, emotionless. The anger and hurt were still there, but the thirst for revenge had been replaced by a deep exhaustion. All she wanted was peace for herself and her daughter. Despite everything, Eleanor felt a strange sense of freedom. The pressure to keep up appearances, to fight for something that was already corrupted, was gone. She had a chance to start over, to build something new, something that was truly hers. But the question that hammered in her mind was, how? How do you rebuild a life from scratch, with a daughter to raise and a past so recent and painful? The company, her legacy, was in ruins, and her name, though cleared, still carried the stigma of the scandal. One night, while Sophie slept peacefully, Eleanor picked up her old laptop. The same laptop where, years ago, she had typed the first lines of code that would change her life. The memories flooded back, the passion for technology, the thrill of creating something from nothing. She opened a blank text editor, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. What would she do now? What could she create that was truly hers, untouchable by betrayal and lies? The answer wasn't clear yet, but the seed of a new idea was beginning to sprout in her mind. She felt a slight tremor in her hands, a mix of fear and excitement. What did the future hold for her and Sophie? The days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months. The small rented apartment became Eleanor and Sophie's refuge, a cocoon where healing and rebuilding happened slowly. The media, always hungry for new stories, eventually found other scandals to exploit, and Eleanor's life gradually faded from the headlines. This brought a welcome relief, allowing her to focus on what really mattered, her daughter and her future. Sophie, with the typical resilience of childhood, adapted quickly to the new routine. She missed the big house and the toys, but her mother's constant presence, uninterrupted attention, and unconditional love filled any void. Eleanor, in turn, devoted herself to every detail of Sophie's life, from homework to playing in the park, trying to make up for lost time and the anxieties they had endured. Ethan remained a constant and comforting presence. He not only handled the legal proceedings, the audit of the old company, the recovery of assets, the divorce from Richard, but also became a loyal friend. His visits were always accompanied by news, not always good, but always with the promise that justice, however slow, was being served. The company audit revealed the devastating extent of Veronica's scheme. Hundreds of millions of dollars had been siphoned off, the financial structure was compromised, and its reputation was irreparably tarnished. Richard, in his desperation, tried to approach Eleanor, seeking a reconciliation that might perhaps salvage what was left of his image and fortune. But Eleanor, though no longer feeling anger, kept a cautious distance. The wounds were too deep, the trust irretrievably broken. "He's in a very tough spot, Eleanor," Ethan explained one day as they had coffee in the small kitchen. "The creditors are closing in, and the company is on the brink of bankruptcy. He lost everything, just like you predicted." Eleanor just sighed. "I never wanted him to lose everything, Ethan. I just wanted him to listen to me, to trust me, to not trade years of partnership and love for an illusion." Despite the external turmoil, Eleanor's mind was buzzing. That night she had opened her laptop, had reignited a flame. She started coding again, not with the pressure of building an empire, but with the pure joy of creation. Small projects, complex, algorithms that solved everyday problems, ideas that came in moments of inspiration. It was a form of therapy, a way to reconnect with the most authentic part of herself. One of these projects started as a game for Sophie, an educational app that turned learning math into a fun and interactive game. Sophie loved it. She spent hours immersed in the colorful and challenging world her mother had created. Eleanor watched her daughter, and an idea began to take shape. What if she could turn this passion into something more? Something that wasn't just a game but a tool, a solution. The idea was ambitious but different from anything she had done before. It wasn't about making $1 billion, but about building something meaningful, something that could truly help people. She started researching, studying new technologies, and diving into communities of independent developers. With every line of code, every problem solved, Eleanor felt a renewed energy. Ethan, noticing the change in Eleanor, encouraged her. "You're a genius, Eleanor. Don't let what happened erase that. The world needs your ideas." With Ethan's support and Sophie's inspiration, Eleanor decided to take the next step. She had no capital, no team, but she had the experience, the talent, and above all, the resilience. She rented a small desk in a co-working space, a vibrant place full of young entrepreneurs, and began working on her new project. It was a humble new beginning, but it was full of promise. With each day, with each line of code, Eleanor felt she was getting closer not just to a new business, but to a new version of herself. A version that was stronger, wiser, and finally, free. She wondered if she could turn this new passion into a success. The small desk in the co-working space, with its simple table and ergonomic chair, became Eleanor's new sanctuary. Far from the luxury and opulence of her old company, here she found a freedom and authenticity she hadn't felt in a long time. The buzz of conversations, the clatter of keyboards, and the smell of fresh coffee were the soundtrack to her new journey. On weekends, Sophie loved visiting Mommy's office, fascinated by the monitors and the creative energy of the place. The project Eleanor was developing was an innovative educational app focused on gamification and artificial intelligence to personalize learning for children. It wasn't just a game. It was a complete platform that adapted to each student's pace and needs, turning studying into an engaging adventure. She invested every penny she could save and every hour of her day into building this dream. Ethan, in addition to being a friend and legal advisor, began to act as an informal mentor. He helped her navigate the complex world of startups, connecting her with angel investors and other entrepreneurs. "You have an incredible product, Eleanor," he would repeat. "You just need the right opportunity to show it to the world." The opportunity came in the form of a startup competition, sponsored by a renowned tech accelerator. The prize was a significant investment, and the chance to pitch the project to a group of venture capitalists. Eleanor hesitated. The idea of putting herself out there again, of competing, brought back painful memories of the past. But the sparkle in Sophie's eyes when she used the app and the passion she felt for the project pushed her forward. The preparation for the competition was intense. Sleepless nights, debugging code, refining the interface, rehearsing the presentation. Eleanor wanted every detail to be perfect. She knew she couldn't fail, not just for herself, but for Sophie, for Ethan, for everyone who believed in her. Meanwhile, Richard's life was on a downward spiral. The company he and Eleanor had built was in the process of liquidation. The debts were astronomical, and Richard's reputation was in shambles. He tried to get back on his feet, but the shadow of the scandal and the lack of capital haunted him. His former partners abandoned him, and the life of luxury he cherished so much crumbled. He found himself living in a modest apartment, struggling to pay the bills, a reality he had never imagined. One day Richard sought out Eleanor, not with his former arrogance, but with a downcast expression and teary eyes. He asked for forgiveness, not just for the betrayals, but for his blindness, for the way he had underestimated and discarded her. "I lost everything, Eleanor," he confessed, his voice choked. "And the worst part is, I lost you and Sophie. I was a fool." Eleanor listened to him with surprising calm. The anger had dissipated, giving way to a quiet sadness. She no longer felt the need for revenge, only the bitter realization that the person she once loved had gotten lost in his own ambition. "I can't go back, Richard," she said, her voice soft but firm. "But I hope you find your way, and that one day Sophie can forgive you." The conversation was a turning point for Eleanor. She realized she had finally broken free from the chains of the past. Forgiveness, even if it didn't mean reconciliation, was an essential step for her own peace. On the day of the competition, Eleanor was nervous but confident. The stage was large, the lights were blinding, and the audience, composed of investors and industry experts, seemed imposing. But when she started talking about her project, about the passion behind every line of code, about the impact it could have on children's lives, her voice grew stronger. She presented the app masterfully, demonstrating its functionality and potential. The reaction was immediate. The judges were impressed, the investors intrigued. Eleanor's app wasn't just technologically advanced, it had a soul, a clear purpose. At the end of her presentation, the applause was warm and genuine. Eleanor knew there was still a long road ahead, but at that moment on stage under the spotlights she felt like she was back. Not as the betrayed wife or the ousted founder, but as Eleanor, the innovator, the creator, the mother. The future, once uncertain, now seemed like a vast horizon full of possibilities. She wondered if this new phase would bring even greater challenges, but she was ready to face them. Winning the startup competition was a watershed moment, not just for the financial investment, which was crucial, but for the validation. That public recognition, coming from industry experts, restored Eleanor's confidence in her abilities and her worth. The small desk in the co-working space soon became inadequate. With the seed capital, she was able to rent a larger office, hire the first members of her team, and dive headfirst into developing her app. The project, named Learn and Play, began to take shape and substance. Eleanor was an inspiring leader, combining her technical genius with a rare empathy. She valued every team member, encouraging creativity and collaboration. Sophie, now 9, was the most enthusiastic beta tester. Her suggestions and observations were always taken into account, which made her feel like an integral part of the process. Ethan, who had become her right-hand man, handled the legal and strategic side of things, negotiating contracts, protecting patents, and guiding Eleanor through the complexities of the business world. Their partnership was solid, built on mutual respect and a deep friendship. He saw her not just as a client, but as a visionary, and he was determined to help her reach her full potential. While Eleanor's star was rising, Richard's continued to fall. The liquidation of their old company was a painful and humiliating process. He lost the mansion, the luxury cars, the investments. The life he had so carefully built crumbled, leaving him with little more than the clothes on his back and considerable debt. Loneliness was his only companion, and regret, a heavy burden. He tried to get back on his feet, but the shadow of the scandal and his lack of credibility followed him everywhere. Veronica, for her part, was facing the consequences of her crimes. The international investigation revealed a complex web of fraud, and she was sentenced to a long prison term. The news of her conviction brought a sense of justice to Eleanor, but not joy, only the confirmation that the truth, no matter how long it takes, always comes to light. The official launch of Learn and Play was a resounding success. The app was critically acclaimed and quickly won over parents and educators. Its innovative approach to learning, combining fun and effectiveness, filled a gap in the market. Within a few months, Learn and Play became a phenomenon, reaching millions of downloads and transforming Eleanor's small startup into a fast-growing company. Eleanor's life, though still demanding, was filled with a new purpose. She found herself in meetings with investors, speaking at tech conferences, and, most importantly, spending quality time with Sophie. The girl was flourishing, bright and curious, proud of the mother who had risen from the ashes. One day, as Eleanor was reviewing the company's growth reports, Ethan walked into her office with a serious expression. "Eleanor, I need to show you something." He placed a tablet on her desk, displaying a news story from a tech portal. The headline was striking. Richard Davis launches new edtech startup, promises to revolutionize the market. A chill ran down Eleanor's spine. Richard, her ex-husband, the man who had betrayed and humiliated her, was back in the game. And, to her surprise, in the very same market niche she had created. The article detailed that he had secured a significant investment from a group of foreign investors, and his new app, Know and Grow, promised to be a direct competitor to Learn and Play. Eleanor's first reaction was shock, followed by a pang of anger. How dare he? After everything that had happened, after nearly destroying her life, he was trying to copy her success, to invade her space. But the anger soon gave way to a cold determination. She had built her empire on her own genius and resilience. She would not let Richard or anyone else take that away from her again. "Ethan," she said, her voice firm, "I want you to investigate every detail of this new company. I want to know who these investors are, where this money is coming from. And I want you to prepare our legal team. We are not going to let him undermine us." Ethan nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. The legal and emotional battle was over, but the war for legacy, for recognition, and for the future of learn and play was just beginning. Eleanor knew the road would be tough, but she was ready. She had learned how to fight, and she would not back down. What would Richard do now? To try to sabotage her success? The news of Richard's aggressive return to the edtech market reverberated through the halls of Learn and Play. The team, which had rallied around Eleanor and her vision, felt the threat. But instead of discouragement, a wave of solidarity and determination swept through them. They knew how hard Eleanor had fought to get here, and they were ready to defend her and the project they loved so much. Eleanor, for her part, channeled her initial anger into focus. She would not let the shadow of the past eclipse the bright future she was building. "We're not going to get distracted," she told her team in a meeting. "Our focus remains on improving our product, innovating and delivering the best for our users. Competition is part of the game, and we are prepared." Ethan, true to his word, delved into investigating Richard's new venture. What he discovered, however, was more complex than a simple copycat idea. The investors behind Know and Grow were a venture capital fund known for its aggressive and sometimes questionable tactics. And most intriguingly, one of the fund's main shareholders had indirect ties to Veronica's family. "It's a complicated web, Eleanor," Ethan explained, showing her a complex organizational chart. "It seems Veronica's family, or at least part of it, is trying to recoup the money she lost when she was arrested, and Richard, in his desperate search for a second chance, has become a tool for them." The revelation was a shock. The idea that Veronica, even from behind bars, could still influence her life was disturbing. But it also raised a red flag. This wasn't just about market competition. It was a personal vendetta, a power play with deeper ramifications. Eleanor ramped up her efforts. She and her team dedicated themselves to developing new features for Learn and Play, enhancing the artificial intelligence, expanding the content, and exploring new partnerships with schools and educational institutions. The quality of her product was her greatest weapon, and she knew it. Meanwhile, Know and Grow was launched with an aggressive marketing campaign, promising to revolutionize the market with groundbreaking technology. However, initial reviews revealed that Richard's app was largely an inferior and less intuitive version of Learn and Play, with some features blatantly copied. The developer community and more discerning users quickly noticed the similarities, and criticism began to mount. Richard, in his public appearances, tried to present himself as the visionary who had risen from the ashes, but his posture was forced, and the shadow of his past followed him. He attempted to disparage Learn and Play in interviews, insinuating that Eleanor's success was just luck, but his words rang hollow. Despite the criticism, Know and Grow managed to attract a considerable user base, fueled by heavy marketing and the financial resources of the investment fund. The battle for the educational market was heating up, and Eleanor knew she needed more than just a good product. She needed a strategy. One afternoon, while Sophie was playing with the app, Eleanor had an idea. "Ethan," she said, "what if we turned competition into collaboration?" Ethan looked at her, intrigued. "What do you mean?" "Not with Richard, of course," Eleanor clarified, "but with other companies, other startups that are developing complementary solutions. Instead of fighting alone, we can join forces, create an ecosystem. That would give us more strength, more reach, and would further differentiate us from Richard's predatory approach." The idea was bold, but it made sense. In such a dynamic market, collaboration could be the key to sustainability and growth. Ethan, with his business acumen, saw the potential. That's a masterstroke, Eleanor. While they're trying to tear us down, we'll be building bridges. Eleanor's new strategy wasn't just about business. It was about values. She wanted to build a company that reflected her principles: innovation, collaboration, and a genuine commitment to education. The battle against Richard and his investors wouldn't just be for market share, but for the soul of the edtech sector. Eleanor was ready to show that a true revolution isn't made with copies and aggressive tactics, but with originality and purpose. She wondered if this new approach would be enough to overcome the challenges ahead. Eleanor's collaboration strategy began to take shape. Ethan, with his network of contacts and negotiation skills, initiated talks with other startups in the education sector. The idea was to create an alliance, a sort of consortium of companies that shared the same vision of innovative and accessible learning. The response was surprisingly positive. Many smaller companies, struggling to compete with the market's big players, saw Eleanor's proposal as an opportunity for mutual growth and strength. Meanwhile, Learn and Play continued to evolve. Eleanor's motivated and engaged team launched new features, expanded content for different age groups and languages, and invested heavily in research and development. The product's quality was undeniable, and positive word of mouth, combined with a smart marketing strategy focused on educational value, drove its growth. Richard, on the other hand, faced mounting difficulties. Know and Grow, despite the initial investment and aggressive campaign, couldn't sustain its momentum. Criticisms about its lack of originality and unintuitive interface piled up. Richard's team, largely composed of professionals hired in a hurry and lacking the same commitment as Eleanor's, showed signs of low morale. Furthermore, the investors, accustomed to quick and aggressive returns, began to pressure him for results. Ethan discovered that the investment fund behind Richard was, in fact, under investigation for questionable financial practices in other countries. The connection to Veronica's family became more apparent, and the pressure on Richard intensified. He found himself once again in a precarious situation, a pawn in a game much larger than he had imagined. Eleanor's alliance, dubbed Connected Education, began to bear fruit. Together, the partner companies could offer a more complete and diverse package of educational solutions, reaching a wider audience and strengthening their market position. The collaboration allowed for resource sharing, knowledge exchange, and the creation of joint projects that none of them could have accomplished alone. One of the most ambitious projects of Connected Education was the development of a free access platform for public schools in underserved areas. The initiative, led by Eleanor, aimed to democratize access to quality education, using technology as a tool for inclusion. The response was enormous, generating a wave of support and recognition for Learn and Play and its partners. By this point, Eleanor was no longer so concerned with Richard. The competition had become a catalyst for her own innovation and growth. She was building something much bigger than an app. She was building a movement. One day, Ethan received a call. It was Richard. He wanted to meet with Eleanor. "He sounds desperate," Ethan reported. "He said he needs to talk to you about something urgent, something that could affect all of us." Eleanor hesitated. The idea of meeting Richard brought back painful memories, but the mention of something that could affect everyone intrigued her. She had learned not to underestimate Richard's ability to get into trouble, and the connection to the investment fund and Veronica's family was a real concern. "Set up the meeting, Ethan," Eleanor decided, "but in a public place and with you present. I want to hear what he has to say." The meeting was arranged at a discreet cafe, far from the prying eyes of the media. Richard arrived looking haggard, with deep, dark circles under his eyes and an expression of defeat. He was no longer the arrogant, confident man Eleanor had once known. "Eleanor, I need your help," he began, his voice choked. "I've gotten myself into something much bigger than I imagined. The investment fund, they're not what they seem. They're using Know and Grow to launder money, and I'm the scapegoat." Eleanor and Ethan exchanged a look. The revelation, though shocking, was not entirely unexpected. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to fit. Richard, in his desperate quest for a second chance, had fallen into a trap even more dangerous than Veronica's. He had become an accomplice, albeit unwittingly, in a criminal scheme. "They've threatened me, Eleanor," Richard continued, his eyes welling up. "They said if I don't cooperate, they'll frame me for everything. And worse, they mentioned Sophie." The mention of Sophie made Eleanor's blood run cold. The anger she thought she had overcome resurfaced with full force. This was no longer about business or revenge. It was about protecting her daughter. "What exactly do they want from you, Richard?" Eleanor asked, her voice cold and controlled. She knew she had to stay calm, but inside, a whirlwind of emotions was consuming her. The battle she thought she had won was about to begin again, and this time, the stakes were much higher. She wondered if Richard was being sincere or if this was just another one of his manipulations. Richard's mention of Sophie was a direct blow to Eleanor's heart. The coldness she had cultivated to deal with her ex-husband shattered, replaced by a protective fury. Her eyes, once calm, now burned with a dangerous intensity. Ethan, sensing the shift in the atmosphere, placed a hand on Eleanor's shoulder, a silent gesture for her to remain calm. "They want me to continue as the face of the company, Eleanor," Richard explained, his voice trembling. "They want me to sign documents, to make it look like Know and Grow is a legitimate business while they continue to funnel funds, and if I don't, they've threatened to expose fake information about me that would frame me for money laundering, and worse, they implied they could use Sophie to force me to cooperate." Eleanor took a deep breath, trying to control the rage bubbling inside her. "What kind of fake information, Richard? And how could they have access to Sophie?" "They have forged evidence of bank transfers to offshore accounts in my name, Eleanor. And as for Sophie, they have pictures of her from school, from the park. They said they have eyes and ears everywhere, that if I don't cooperate, her life could become a living hell." Richard was visibly terrified, which to Eleanor was a sign that he wasn't lying. Ethan intervened, his voice calm and analytical. "Richard, you need to give us every detail. Names, dates, locations, anything that can help us understand the extent of this scheme. Who are these people? How did they connect with you?" Richard, feeling cornered but also visibly relieved to have someone to share the burden with, began to pour everything out. He told them how, after his old company went bankrupt, he was approached by an intermediary who promised a multi-million-dollar investment for a new startup. Desperate to get back on his feet, he didn't thoroughly investigate the source of the money. The investors, represented by a man named Victor Orlov, seemed legitimate at first, but soon began making strange demands, like creating shell companies and moving large sums of money without clear justification. "Victor Orlov," Ethan murmured, jotting down the name. "That name sounds familiar. I'll look into it." Eleanor, still reeling from the gravity of the situation, realized the threat to Sophie was real. She couldn't ignore it. The old rivalry with Richard, the past hurts, all of it seemed trivial in the face of imminent danger. "Richard, you need to cooperate with us," Eleanor said, her voice now softer but still firm. "We'll help you, but you have to be completely transparent. Don't hide anything." Richard nodded, his eyes filled with gratitude. "I'll do whatever it takes, Eleanor. I just want to protect Sophie." From that moment on, the dynamic between Eleanor and Richard changed. The mistrust was still there, but they had a common goal: to dismantle the criminal network and protect Sophie. Ethan and his legal team began to draw up a plan. The first step was to gather as much evidence as possible without raising suspicion. Eleanor, for her part, tightened security measures for Sophie. She hired a discreet private security detail to accompany her to school and extracurricular activities, and installed monitoring systems at their home. She didn't want to alarm Sophie, so she explained they were new security measures for Mummy's company. Ethan's investigation revealed that Victor Orlov was a known financial operator in the criminal underworld, with ties to international crime syndicates and indeed to Veronica's family. It seemed Veronica's family's revenge was more elaborate than Eleanor had imagined, using Richard as a pawn to destabilize her while laundering money. The situation was delicate. Exposing the scheme would put Richard and perhaps even Sophie in immediate danger. But doing nothing was unthinkable. Eleanor knew she had to act with intelligence and caution. "We need a plan, Ethan," Eleanor said one night as they reviewed the information. "A plan that allows us to expose Victor Orlov and protect Richard and Sophie without putting anyone in harm's way? Ethan nodded. I have an idea, Eleanor, but it's risky. We'll need Richard's cooperation, and he'll have to act as a double agent. He'll have to keep pretending to cooperate with Victor Orloff while feeding us inside information. Eleanor thought for a moment. It was a huge risk, but it seemed to be the only way out. He'll do it, she said with a conviction that surprised even herself. He'll do anything to protect Sophie. The battle that was unfolding was no longer just about the market or reputation. It was a battle for her daughter's safety, for justice and for freedom. Eleanor was ready to fight, but she knew this would be the most dangerous fight of her life. She wondered if Richard would have the courage to face his tormentors. Richard's decision to cooperate with Eleanor and Ethan wasn't easy, but the threat to Sophie outweighed any fear or pride. He became a double agent, a reluctant spy in the heart of Victor Orloff's operation. With every meeting, every document he signed, he felt the weight of betrayal and the imminent risk, but the image of Sophie drove him on. Ethan and his team worked tirelessly to guide Richard. Tiny microphones were planted in his clothes, discreet cameras in his glasses. Every interaction with Victor Orloff and his associates was recorded, every document photographed. The goal was to build an irrefutable case that could expose the criminal network without putting Richard in direct danger. Eleanor, meanwhile, maintained the facade of her company, learn and play, growing and thriving. She attended conferences, gave interviews, launched new features, all to divert attention from her secret activities. The tension was constant. The fear that something would go wrong, that Richard would be discovered, hung over her like a dark cloud. Sophie's life continued, seemingly as normal. She went to school, played with friends, and used her mom's app with enthusiasm. Eleanor did her best to shield her from the approaching shadow, maintaining a routine of normalcy and affection. The private security guard, a discreet and efficient ex-cop, was always nearby, a silent but reassuring presence. The information Richard gathered was invaluable. He discovered that Victor Orloff was not only laundering money through Know and Grow, but was also using the platform to collect children's data, information that could be sold on the black market or used for other nefarious purposes. The revelation made Eleanor's blood run cold. The idea that her own ex-husband, even unwittingly, was involved in something so dark was sickening. "This is much more serious than we thought, Eleanor," Ethan said one night as they analyzed the new evidence. "It's not just money laundering. It's the exploitation of minors' data. We need to act fast." Ethan's plan was complex and required the cooperation of the authorities. He had established contact with a specialized unit in the FBI that handled cybercrime and money laundering. But they needed more than just recordings and documents. They needed concrete proof, a moment when Victor Orloff could be caught red-handed. Richard, under Ethan's guidance, began to plant the idea of a major transaction, a deal of a lifetime that would require the presence of Victor Orloff and his top associates. The bait was a fictitious investment in a new educational technology that promised exorbitant returns. Victor Orloff, greedy and confident in his impunity, took the bait. The location chosen for the big deal was an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city, a perfect setting for an ambush. Undercover federal agents were in position, waiting for Ethan's signal. Eleanor, though not physically present, monitored everything closely from a surveillance van, her heart pounding. Richard arrived at the warehouse, visibly nervous but determined. He met with Victor Orloff and his associates, who displayed the typical arrogance of men who feel untouchable. The conversation revolved around the details of the transaction, with Richard playing his part as an ambitious but naive businessman. At a crucial moment, Richard, following Ethan's instructions, asked to see the final documents for the deal, which included the authorization to transfer a large sum of money to an offshore account. Victor Orloff, unsuspecting, handed over the papers. At that instant, Richard triggered a small device in his watch, sending the signal to Ethan. "Now!" Ethan whispered into the radio. In a matter of seconds, the warehouse was swarmed by federal agents. Victor Orloff and his associates were caught completely by surprise, with no time to react. The scene was chaotic with shouts, handcuffs, and the confusion of the criminals. Richard, pale but relieved, was quickly escorted from the scene by the agents. Eleanor, in the van, let out a long sigh of relief. The operation had been a success. Victor Orloff and his network had been dismantled. The threat to Sophie had finally been neutralized, but victory came at a price. Richard's exposure as an informant would put him in a delicate position. He would need protection and a new start, far from the shadow of his past. And Eleanor knew that although justice had been served, the scars from this battle would take time to heal. She wondered how Richard would rebuild his life, and if he would ever be able to find peace. The warehouse operation was a resounding success. Victor Orloff and his top associates were arrested red-handed, and the vast network of money laundering and data exploitation was dismantled. The news exploded in the media, revealing the extent of the fraud and the danger of the criminal organization. Richard, though under police protection, was at the center of the attention, his image as a fallen businessman replaced by that of a reluctant hero who helped expose an international scheme. For Eleanor, Orloff's arrest brought immense relief. The threat to Sophie had been neutralized, and justice had finally prevailed. However, the complexity of Richard's situation required special attention. He had cooperated with the authorities, but his initial involvement in the scheme put him in a delicate legal position. Ethan, with his legal expertise, worked tirelessly to negotiate a deal for Richard. His full cooperation, the evidence he provided, and the fact that he had been, for the most part, a victim of Orloff's manipulations, were crucial factors. In the end, Richard received a lenient sentence on the condition that he step away from the business world completely for a period and cooperate in future investigations. He was also required to return any funds he had, even unwittingly, received from the scheme. Richard's decision was to move to a small town in the countryside, far from the spotlight and the hustle of the city. He wanted to start over, to find a purpose not driven by unchecked ambition. Before he left, he went to see Eleanor and Sophie. The meeting was charged with emotion. "I'm so sorry for everything, Eleanor," he said, his eyes welling up. "I know there's no forgiving what I did, but I hope one day Sophie can understand that I tried to protect her." Eleanor, seeing the sincerity in his eyes, felt a pang of compassion. "Sophie knows you love her, Richard, and I hope you find the peace you're looking for." Sophie, with her childlike innocence, hugged her father, not fully understanding the complexity of the situation, but feeling the sadness of the farewell. It was a bittersweet goodbye, a chapter closing to make way for a new beginning. With the dust settling, Eleanor could finally dedicate herself fully to learn and play. The company thrived, driven not only by the quality of its product, but also by its founder's story of overcoming adversity. Eleanor became an icon, an inspiration for female entrepreneurs and for all who believe in the power of resilience. Connected Education, the startup alliance Eleanor had envisioned, flourished. Together, the companies were revolutionizing the education sector, offering innovative and accessible solutions to millions of children worldwide. The free platform for public schools became a model of success, attracting investment from foundations and international organizations. Sophie, now 10, was a bright and happy girl. She was immensely proud of her mother and her work. The constant presence of Ethan in their lives was a source of stability and affection. He had become more than a friend. He was part of the family, a pillar of support for Eleanor and a father figure to Sophie. One day, as Eleanor and Ethan were working in the office, he surprised her with a question. "Eleanor, have you ever thought about expanding Learn and Play to other markets? The demand is huge, and our product is one of a kind." Eleanor smiled. "I have been thinking about it, Ethan, but not just expanding. I want to create a foundation, a non-profit that uses technology to fight educational inequality on a global scale. I want the legacy of Learn and Play to be much bigger than just a successful app." Ethan looked at her with admiration. "That's an ambitious idea, Eleanor, but I wouldn't expect anything less from you, and I'll be by your side, as always." Eleanor's life had come full circle. From a woman on the edge of an abyss, she had transformed into a visionary leader, an unstoppable force. She had lost almost everything, but She had regained what was most important: her dignity, her daughter, and her purpose. The road ahead would still be challenging, but Eleanor was ready. She had learned that true strength lies not in the absence of falls, but in the ability to get back up, to learn from the scars, and to build a better future, not just for herself, but for the world. She wondered what new challenges life would present, but she knew that with Sophie and Ethan by her side, she could face them. The idea of a global foundation to combat educational inequality quickly became Eleanor's new focus. It wasn't just a charity project, it was the materialization of her vision, a way to transform her own experience of overcoming adversity into something that could benefit millions. Ethan, as always, embraced the idea with enthusiasm, dedicating himself to legally structuring the Learn and Transform Foundation. The following months were filled with intense work. Eleanor traveled, gave speeches, and met with educational leaders, philanthropists, and non-governmental organizations. Her life story, her passion, and the proven effectiveness of Learn and Play opened doors that had once seemed impassable. The foundation quickly gained support and funding, attracting talent and volunteers from around the world. Sophie, now 11, accompanied her mother on some of these trips, soaking in every experience. She saw her mother not just as the creator of her favorite app, but as a woman who was changing the world. Their relationship deepened with each passing day, built on a foundation of love, respect, and mutual admiration. Richard, in his new life in the countryside, was finding a different kind of peace. He had dedicated himself to a small organic farming project, reconnecting with the land and a simpler pace of life. The scars of the past were still there, but his arrogance had been replaced by a newfound humility. He kept in regular contact with Sophie through phone and video calls, and weekend visits became a sacred ritual. He was slowly rebuilding the bridge with his daughter, one brick at a time. The Learn and Transform Foundation launched its first pilot projects in underserved communities in Latin America and Africa. The Learn and Play app was adapted for different languages and cultural contexts, and tablets were distributed to children who had never had access to a computer. The results were inspiring. Student engagement increased, school performance improved, and the hope for a better future was ignited in many hearts. Eleanor, at the peak of her career and with a clear purpose, felt fulfilled. But life, as always, had its surprises. On one of her trips to oversee a foundation project in a remote village in a developing nation, she met Dr. Lucas Cole, a Doctors Without Borders physician dedicated to bringing healthcare and education to indigenous communities. Lucas was a man of few words, but great deeds. His eyes, tired from long journeys, shone with a contagious passion. He and Eleanor connected instantly, sharing the same vision of a more just and accessible world. Their conversations, initially professional, soon deepened, revealing a rare synchronicity. Ethan, who accompanied Eleanor on some of these trips, noticed the change. He saw the sparkle in Eleanor's eyes, the lightness in her smile. He, who had always supported her unconditionally, felt a pang of something he couldn't quite identify. It was a mix of joy at seeing her happy and a subtle melancholy. The relationship between Eleanor and Lucas blossomed amidst the challenges of the jungle. They shared simple meals, watched the sunset over the river, and dreamed of a future where technology and medicine could walk hand in hand to transform lives. Lucas, with his experience in remote communities, offered valuable insights for the foundation, and Eleanor, with her technological genius, envisioned new ways to apply Learn and Play in health and wellness contexts. Upon returning to the city, Eleanor was radiant. She had found not only a partner for the foundation, but also a partner for life. The news of her new relationship, though discreet, reached Ethan. He congratulated her with a sincere smile, but Eleanor noticed a different glint in his eyes, a restrained emotion she couldn't decipher. Eleanor's life felt complete. She had her daughter, her company, her foundation, and now a new love. The past, with its pain and betrayals, seemed distant, a memory that had shaped her but no longer defined her. She wondered if this new phase of her life would bring the stability and happiness she had sought for so long, or if new challenges would arise, testing her resilience once more. The arrival of Lucas in Eleanor's life brought a new dimension of happiness and fulfillment. Their shared passion for social causes, Lucas's intelligence and his kindness were a balm to Eleanor's soul, which had endured so many trials. Sophie, with her childhood perceptiveness, welcomed Lucas warmly, seeing him as a friend and a partner in her mother's adventures. Ethan, watching Eleanor's happiness, felt a mixture of joy and a pang of sadness. He had been by her side in her darkest moments, fought her battles, and witnessed her resurrection. Their friendship was deep and unshakable, but Ethan realized his feelings for Eleanor had transcended friendship long ago. He loved her, but he knew his place was as her loyal confidant, her staunchest ally, not her romantic partner. He kept this love, though secret, content to see her happy. The Learn and Transform Foundation flourished under Eleanor's leadership and Lucas's expertise. The pilot projects expanded, reaching more communities and positively impacting the lives of thousands of children. The synergy between Eleanor's educational technology and Lucas's humanitarian vision was powerful, creating innovative solutions to complex challenges. The Learn and Play company also continued to grow, solidifying its position as a leader in the edtech market. Eleanor, with her strategic vision, ensured the company maintained its focus on innovation and social responsibility, allocating a significant portion of its profits to the foundation. Richard, in his new life in the countryside, was finding a different purpose. He had become an active member of the local community, dedicating himself to sustainability and environmental education projects. Sophie's visits were the highlight of his weeks, and he strived to be the father she deserved. His relationship with Eleanor, though still distant, was one of mutual respect. He admired her for the woman she had become, and for the way she had overcome adversity. One day, during a foundation meeting, Lucas presented an ambitious proposal to expand the reach of the Learn and Transform Foundation to conflict zones, where education was often disrupted and children were the biggest victims. The idea was to create mobile learning centers equipped with technology and educational materials that could be deployed to hard-to-reach areas. Eleanor was thrilled with the proposal. It was a huge challenge, but she saw the potential for impact. Ethan, however, expressed concern. Lucas, security in these regions is extremely volatile. We need to consider the risks to our team and to the children. Lucas nodded. I understand your concerns, Ethan, but the need is immense, and we have experienced local partners and humanitarian organizations that can help us mitigate the risks. The discussion went on for hours, with Eleanor and Lucas passionately defending the proposal, and Ethan outlining the logistical and security challenges. In the end, Lucas's vision prevailed, and the team decided to move forward with the project on the condition that all security measures were rigorously implemented. The preparation for the expansion into conflict zones was intense. Eleanor and Lucas worked side by side, planning every detail, from the logistics of transporting equipment to training the local team. Lucas's passion for his mission was contagious, and Eleanor felt more and more connected to him. In the midst of all this work, Lucas made a special request to Eleanor. At a romantic dinner under the stars, he asked her to marry him. Eleanor, moved to tears, accepted. The happiness was palpable, and the news was received with joy by Sophie and the entire team. Ethan, upon hearing of the engagement, felt his heart ache, but he forced a smile and congratulated the couple sincerely. He knew Eleanor deserved all the happiness in the world, and he would always be there for her, in any capacity. The wedding was planned for a few months later before Lucas's departure, for the first mission in a conflict zone. Eleanor's life seemed to have found its course, a path of love, purpose, and fulfillment. However, fate, as always, had its twists. Lucas's impending trip to a war zone brought with it a silent apprehension, a shadow that hung over their newfound happiness. Eleanor wondered if life would finally grant her a period of lasting peace, or if new, even more dangerous challenges were lurking around the corner. The preparations for Eleanor and Lucas's wedding mingled with the intense organization of the Learn and Transform Foundation's first mission in a conflict zone. The joy of the engagement was tempered by apprehension over Lucas's imminent departure. Eleanor tried to stay optimistic, but the reality of the risks was undeniable. Sophie, excited about the idea of having Lucas as a stepfather, helped with the wedding preparations, choosing flowers and music. She saw a hero in Lucas, a man who dedicated his life to helping others. His presence brought a sense of security and completeness to their small family. Ethan, despite the silent pain of his unrequited love, continued to be Eleanor's pillar of support. He handled the foundation's legal details, ensured the security of the equipment and team, and offered invaluable advice. He knew his role was to protect Eleanor and her dreams, even if it meant sacrificing his own feelings. The mission to the conflict region in the Middle East was complex. The Foundation's team, led by Lucas, would work in partnership with local humanitarian organizations to establish mobile learning centers in refugee camps. Security was the top concern, and every precaution was taken. On the eve of Lucas's departure, he and Eleanor had an intimate dinner. The conversation was light, but the weight of the farewell hung in the air. Lucas promised to call whenever possible, and Eleanor asked him to take care of himself. Their goodbye hug was long, filled with love and a silent prayer. The first few days of the mission brought sporadic but reassuring news. Lucas sent short messages describing their progress, the children's joy, and the logistical challenges. Eleanor breathed a sigh of relief with each new message, but the worry never completely left her. Then, silence. One day, 2 days, a week, with no news from Lucas. Eleanor's heart began to tighten. Attempts to contact the Foundation's team in the conflict zone were fruitless. The fear she had tried to suppress began to take over. Ethan, sensing Eleanor's anguish, activated all his contacts. He called embassies, consulates, humanitarian organizations. The information he managed to get was fragmented and alarming. There had been an attack on a humanitarian convoy in the region where Lucas was. Eleanor felt the floor disappear from under her feet again. That nightmare, the feeling of losing everything, was back. Sophie, sensing her mother's tension, asked incessantly about Lucas. Eleanor tried to be strong, but with each passing day, hope dwindled. Richard, who had settled into his new life, heard the news through to the media. He called Eleanor, offering support. "I know what it's like to lose someone, Eleanor, and I know what uncertainty feels like. If you need anything at all, let me know." His voice was sincere, and Eleanor felt a strange comfort in his solidarity. The weeks dragged on in an endless agony. Eleanor barely ate, barely slept. Her work at the company and the Foundation became a blur. The image of Lucas, his smile, his passion, haunted her. She refused to accept the worst, but reality was cruel. Until, a month after the disappearance, Ethan received a call. The voice. On the other end was an official from a humanitarian organization. "We've found Dr. Cole, sir. He's alive." Eleanor, who was standing next to Ethan, heard the words and felt a relief so intense her legs gave out. The tears she had held back for so long finally streamed down her face. But the joy was quickly tempered by the official's next sentence. "He's seriously injured, Eleanor, and he's been captured. He's being held hostage by a rebel group." Eleanor's world collapsed again. Alive, yes, but in captivity. Hope mingled with a new kind of despair. The battle to bring him back would be even more difficult and dangerous than anything she had ever faced. She wondered if she could endure another trial, and how she would explain to Sophie that Lucas was alive, but in danger. The news that Lucas was alive but being held hostage was a double-edged sword for Eleanor. The initial relief of knowing he hadn't died morphed into an even greater anguish. The uncertainty of captivity, the cruelty of his captors, and the distance made the situation unbearable. Sophie, upon learning that Lucas was alive but in danger, reacted with a mix of hope and fear, her young eyes reflecting the complexity of the situation. Ethan, with his usual pragmatism, dove headfirst into finding solutions. He activated every possible contact, from diplomats to hostage negotiation experts. The situation was delicate. The rebel group holding Lucas was known for its brutality and its political and financial demands. Eleanor, despite her despair, refused to remain idle. She mobilized the Learn and Transform Foundation, using her influence and resources to pressure governments and international organizations. The story of Lucas, a humanitarian doctor who dedicated his life to helping the most vulnerable, quickly gained global attention, generating a wave of solidarity and calls for his release. The kidnappers, however, remained intransigent. Their demands were high and the negotiations dragged on, frustrating everyone. Eleanor felt powerless, a feeling that took her back to the worst moments of her life, when everything seemed beyond her control. In the midst of this storm, an unexpected figure reappeared: Richard. He had been following the news of Lucas's kidnapping, and, moved by a sense of debt and genuine concern, he reached out to Eleanor. "Eleanor, I know you don't trust me, but I have contacts," Richard said, his voice serious. "When I was involved with that investment fund, I met people who operate in the shadows, people who might have information or even access to these rebel groups. I can try to help." Eleanor hesitated. The idea of allying with Richard again, especially on something so delicate, was frightening. But hopelessness was consuming her, and any sliver of hope seemed precious. Ethan, who was present, looked at Richard with suspicion, but recognized the potential utility of his contacts. "What kind of contacts, Richard?" Ethan asked, his voice cautious. Richard explained that during his involvement with the investment fund and its money laundering operations, he had been introduced to intermediaries who dealt with paramilitary groups and militias in various parts of the world. These connections, though dangerous, might be the only way to get inside information on Lucas's whereabouts and the kidnappers' intentions. Eleanor, after long consideration, decided to take the risk. "All right, Richard, but you'll do this under Ethan's supervision, and any false move, any attempt at manipulation, and you're out." Richard nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. He knew this was his chance at redemption, a chance to prove he had changed. From that moment on, Richard became a key player in the rescue operation. He used his old contacts, navigating a dangerous underworld of information and clandestine negotiations. The information he gathered was crucial, revealing details about Lucas's location, the rebel group's structure, and the true motivations behind the kidnapping. It turned out that Lucas's kidnapping wasn't just about money, it was also a way to pressure the Learn and Transform Foundation to withdraw from the region. The rebel group saw education as a threat to their control and ideology. With Richard's information, Ethan and Eleanor were able to devise a more effective plan. They worked in conjunction with intelligence agencies and hostage negotiators, using the inside information to pressure the kidnappers, while simultaneously preparing for a possible rescue operation. The tension was palpable. Every day was an eternity. Eleanor and Sophie clung to hope, while Richard, Ethan, and a team of experts worked against the clock. Lucas's life was on the line, and Eleanor knew she could not fail. She wondered if Richard's redemption would be complete, and if Lucas, upon his return, would be the same man she loved. Richard's collaboration proved invaluable. His underworld connections, once a sign of his downfall, were now the key to unraveling the complex web surrounding Lucas's kidnapping. He operated in the shadows, risking his own life to obtain information, driven by a sense of responsibility and the need to redeem himself. Ethan, though still cautious, recognized Richard's courage and effectiveness. The information Richard brought back was detailed and precise. He discovered that the rebel group, in addition to its political motives, was being funded by a faction of an international drug cartel that saw the Learn and Transform Foundation's presence as an obstacle to its trafficking routes. Lucas's kidnapping was a show of force, a warning for all humanitarian organizations to leave the region. Eleanor felt a chill run down her spine when she learned the extent of the criminal network. The situation was far more dangerous than she had imagined. Lucas's life was not just in the hands of a rebel group, but of an organization with global tentacles. With Richard's intel, Ethan and the team of hostage negotiators intensified their talks with the kidnappers. The strategy was to pressure them from all sides, diplomatically, financially, and, if necessary, militarily. The international media, fed by strategic leaks, kept the case in the spotlight, increasing the pressure on the captors. Sophie, despite her young age, showed surprising resilience. She drew posters for Lucas, wrote letters full of hope, and prayed every night for his return. Watching her gave Eleanor the strength to keep fighting. The days dragged on in an endless agony. Eleanor barely slept, her body and mind exhausted, but her determination was unwavering. She refused to give up on Lucas. Then, in the early hours of one morning, Ethan's phone rang. It was a contact from an intelligence agency. "We have a window of opportunity, Ethan. The kidnappers are on the move. It seems they're under pressure and might be willing to negotiate Lucas's release in exchange for something." The negotiation was tense and lengthy. The kidnappers demanded an exorbitant sum of money and the release of some of their imprisoned members. Eleanor, Ethan, and the team of negotiators worked tirelessly to reduce the demands and ensure Lucas's safety. Richard, for his part, continued to provide crucial information about the group's internal movements, helping the team anticipate the kidnappers' next steps. Finally, after weeks of exhaustive negotiations, a deal was reached. Lucas would be released at a remote location in exchange for a sum of money and the promise that the Learn and Transform Foundation would suspend its activities in the region for a period. Eleanor, Ethan, and Sophie flew to a neighboring country to await Lucas's release. The anxiety was palpable. Hours dragged on, each minute feeling like an eternity. Then, on the horizon, a helicopter appeared. It landed in a clearing, and from inside, a thin, pale man, but with the unmistakable eyes of Lucas, emerged. Eleanor ran toward him, tears streaming down her face. The hug was long and tight, a mixture of relief, love, and pain. Sophie joined them, nestling into the arms of Lucas, who held her tightly. Lucas was free, but the marks of captivity were visible. He was thin, with an unkempt beard and a distant look in his eyes. The joy of the reunion was immense, but Eleanor knew the recovery would be long and painful. Richard, who had monitored the operation from afar, watched the scene with a mix of emotion and relief. He had done his part, and redemption, though still incomplete, seemed closer. In the days that followed, Lucas received medical and psychological care. He was physically weak, but his mind was intact. He recounted the horrors of captivity, the cruelty of the kidnappers, and the constant threat to his life. But he also spoke of the hope that kept him alive, the image of Eleanor and Sophie, and the purpose of his work. Despite the trauma, Lucas was determined to continue his mission. He believed that education was the only way to combat the ignorance and violence that had imprisoned him. Eleanor, by his side, promised to support him every step of the way. Life had given them a second chance, and they were determined to make the most of it. The postponed wedding would take place soon, a symbol of their resilience and their unbreakable love. But Eleanor knew Lucas's trauma was deep, and the healing journey would be long. She wondered if he could overcome what he had endured, and if their love would be strong enough to face the scars of captivity. Lucas's return was a mix of celebration and caution. The joy of having him back was immense, but the marks of captivity were deep. Physically, he recovered well, but the emotional scars were harder to heal. Nightmares, moments of deep introspection, and a certain aversion to enclosed spaces and crowds were some of the symptoms of his trauma. Eleanor, with Ethan's support, dedicated herself completely to Lucas's recovery. She accompanied him to therapy sessions, spent hours talking with him, trying to understand and ease his pain. Sophie, with her innocence and unconditional love, was a balm for Lucas, bringing moments of lightness and joy. The postponed wedding was rescheduled for a few months later, in an intimate and discreet ceremony, far from the spotlight. It was a symbol of a new beginning, of hope, and of the strength of the love that bound them. Ethan, as the best man, watched Eleanor's happiness with a bittersweet but genuine smile. He had accepted his role in her life, and seeing her happy was his greatest reward. Richard, after his collaboration in Lucas's rescue, had completely withdrawn from public life. He remained in his small town in the countryside, dedicating himself to organic farming and rebuilding his life. His contact with Sophie was frequent, and he strived to be a present and loving father. Redemption was a slow process, but he was on the right path. The Learn and Transform Foundation, following Lucas's kidnapping, underwent a restructuring. The security of teams in the field was reinforced, and new risk management policies were implemented. Lucas, even while recovering, remained engaged, participating in meetings and contributing his vision. He was determined not to let the trauma stop him from continuing his mission. Despite the challenges, the Foundation continued to grow, expanding its projects to other underserved regions. The story of Lucas, his dedication, and his recovery inspired millions, turning him into a symbol of resilience and hope. Over time, Lucas began to feel stronger. The therapy sessions helped him process the trauma, and the love of Eleanor and Sophie was his safe harbor. He returned to work at the Foundation, initially in more administrative roles, and then gradually resumed his travels and field projects. A year after the kidnapping, Lucas was almost fully recovered. The emotional scars were still there, but he had learned to live with them, turning pain into strength. He and Eleanor formed a powerful partnership, both in their personal and professional lives. However, life, as always, had its surprises. On a quiet evening, as Eleanor and Lucas were reviewing plans for a new Foundation project, Ethan arrived at the office with a serious expression. "Eleanor, Lucas, I need to talk to you. It's about Veronica." Eleanor felt a chill. The name Veronica, the woman who had caused so much suffering in her life, brought back painful memories. She thought that chapter was closed. "What happened, Ethan?" Eleanor asked, her voice tense. "Veronica got a review of her sentence," Ethan explained. "Based on a new law for parole and good behavior, she'll be released in a few weeks." The news hit like a bombshell. Eleanor and Lucas looked at each other, shocked. The idea of Veronica, the woman who had tried to destroy Eleanor's life and had ties to the criminal network that kidnapped Lucas, being free was disturbing. But how? She was involved in money laundering, data exploitation, and had connections to the group that kidnapped Lucas, Eleanor exclaimed, her voice filled with indignation. "The evidence against her regarding Lucas's kidnapping was circumstantial, Eleanor," Ethan explained, "and the sentence for money laundering and fraud with the new legislation allowed for parole. She served the minimum required time, and with good behavior, she got her release." Anger and frustration washed over Eleanor. She had fought so hard to be free of Veronica's shadow, and now she was back. The peace she had achieved felt fragile, threatened by a past that refused to stay behind. Lucas, sensing Eleanor's anguish, took her hand. "We'll face this together, my love. No matter what happens, we're in this together." Eleanor nodded, but the worry was evident in her eyes. She wondered what Veronica would do now that she was free. Would she seek revenge? Try to reintegrate into society? Or would she be an even greater threat than before? The uncertainty was terrifying, and Eleanor knew she had to be prepared for whatever came next. The news of Veronica's release hung over Eleanor's life like a dark cloud. The peace she had fought, so hard to achieve, felt fragile, threatened by a past that refused to be buried. Lucas, despite his own trauma, was her safe harbor, and Ethan, her tireless strategist. Sophie, now 12, sensed the tension in the air, but Eleanor and Lucas did their best to shield her from the full truth. They didn't want the fear of Veronica to haunt their daughter's childhood. Ethan, anticipating Veronica's moves, activated his contacts. He knew a woman with her history wouldn't just disappear without a trace. The surveillance was discreet but constant. Upon her release from prison, Veronica seemed like a new woman. Her hair was shorter, her gaze more restrained. She didn't seek out the media, didn't make any statements. She just vanished into anonymity, which for Eleanor was even more unsettling. Her silence was deafening. Eleanor tried to focus on her work at the Learn and Transform Foundation and the Learn and Play Company, but Veronica's shadow followed her. She found herself looking over her shoulder, suspicious of every new face, every unexpected movement. Lucas, noticing Eleanor's anxiety, suggested they take a vacation, some time to reconnect and get away from the tension. They traveled to a quiet place, far from everything, where they could enjoy each other's company and Sophie's. The trip was a balm, but the feeling that something was coming persisted. Meanwhile, Richard, in his secluded life in the countryside, also heard about Veronica's release. He felt a chill. He knew what she was capable of and feared she might try to get revenge on Eleanor or even Sophie. He called Ethan, offering any help he could give, even if it was just keeping an eye on his old network of contacts. Veronica's first move came subtly. Small articles on obscure tech blogs began to question the integrity of the Learn and Transform Foundation, insinuating financial irregularities and mismanagement. The accusations were vague, with no concrete proof, but enough to plant the seed of doubt. Eleanor and Ethan knew it was Veronica. It was the same tactic she had used years ago to destabilize Eleanor's old company. The strategy was clear: undermine the Foundation's reputation and, consequently, Eleanor's credibility. "She's trying to destabilize us, Eleanor," Ethan warned. "She knows the Foundation is your weak spot, your legacy. She wants to destroy what you've built." Eleanor felt the anger bubble up again. She had fought so hard to build something positive, something that truly made a difference. And now Veronica was trying to tear it all down. "We're not going to give her the pleasure of seeing us shaken," Eleanor said, her voice firm. "We will respond to every accusation with transparency and facts, and we will continue our work, stronger than ever." Ethan's team worked to trace the origin of the articles and debunk the lies. They discovered the blogs were fronts, recently created and with masked IPs, but the connection to Veronica was undeniable. Despite Eleanor and Ethan's efforts, the smear campaign began to have an impact. Some of the Foundation's donors started asking questions. The mainstream media began to echo the accusations, and Eleanor's once untouchable image started to get tarnished. Veronica, operating from the shadows, seemed to be one step ahead. She wasn't seeking a direct confrontation, but a war of attrition, slowly and systematically eroding Eleanor's and the Foundation's reputation. One day, Eleanor received a court summons. Veronica was suing the Learn and Transform Foundation for unfair competition and misuse of confidential information related to Eleanor's old company. The accusation was absurd, but the legal process would be long and costly, diverting resources and energy from the Foundation. Eleanor felt a deep weariness. She had fought so hard, overcome so much adversity, and now Veronica was back, determined to drag her back into the swamp of the past. Lucas, by Eleanor's side, held her hand. "We're not going to give up, my love. We built this with integrity and passion. The truth will prevail." Eleanor looked at him, at Ethan, at the photo of Sophie on her desk. She knew she couldn't give up. The fight against Veronica wasn't just for her reputation or the Foundation. It was for justice, for the truth, and for the future she was building for Sophie. She wondered what Veronica's next move would be, and if they could expose her before she caused irreparable damage. The lawsuit was a strategic blow from Veronica. She knew that, even without merit, a legal battle would be a drain on time, resources, and energy for Eleanor and the Learn and Transform Foundation. The war of attrition had begun, and Veronica was playing it shrewdly. Eleanor, Lucas, and Ethan gathered to map out a strategy. The first priority was to protect the reputation of the Foundation and Eleanor. Ethan and his legal team prepared a robust defense, refuting every one of Veronica's claims with irrefutable facts and evidence. Meanwhile, the online smear campaign continued. The obscure blogs multiplied, and the accusations became more personal, attacking the private lives of Eleanor and Lucas. It was clear that Veronica was using considerable resources to keep the campaign active. Richard, who had stayed in touch with Ethan, offered a new lead. He had discovered that Veronica was receiving funding from a group of investors who had been hurt by the collapse of the venture capital fund that had backed Know and Grow. They saw Veronica as an opportunity for revenge against Eleanor, whom they indirectly blamed for their losses. "It's a network of resentment and revenge, Eleanor," Ethan explained. "They're using Veronica as an instrument to get to you and the Foundation." The revelation added a new layer of complexity to the situation. It wasn't just Veronica. It was a group of people with financial and personal interests at stake. Eleanor, however, refused to be intimidated. She decided to counterattack. Instead of hiding, she would use the Foundation's platform to expose the truth. She scheduled a press conference, inviting all the major media outlets. At the conference, Eleanor, with Lucas by her side, spoke with a calm and dignity that disarmed the journalists. She addressed Veronica's accusations point by point, presenting evidence and documents that refuted every single one. She spoke about the mission of the Learn and Transform Foundation, about the positive impact it was having on the lives of thousands of children, and about the importance of protecting education from malicious attacks. "I will not allow lies and manipulation to destroy the work we have built with so much effort and passion," Eleanor declared, her voice firm and full of conviction. "We are here to transform lives, and we will not be diverted from our purpose by baseless attacks." The press conference was a success. Eleanor's transparency and integrity won over public opinion. The media, which had previously echoed the accusations, now defended the foundation and questioned Veronica's motives. The lawsuit, meanwhile, dragged on. Ethan, with his impeccable defense, managed to get most of Veronica's claims dismissed. The judge, sensing the case's lack of merit, began to show impatience with the delaying tactics of Veronica's defense team. Veronica, seeing her strategy crumble, started to get desperate. She had underestimated Eleanor's resilience and the strength of her team. Her backers, seeing that the smear campaign wasn't having the desired effect, began to withdraw their support. In a final act of desperation, Veronica tried a risky move. She leaked false information to the press about Lucas's personal life, insinuating that he had abandoned a family in the past and that his humanitarian work was a facade. The news, though quickly debunked by Lucas and Eleanor, caused another shockwave. Lucas's privacy, which had already been so violated by the kidnapping, was once again exposed. Eleanor, however, did not let it shake her. She knew Veronica was playing her last cards. She and Lucas together issued a statement of repudiation, denying the accusations and reinforcing their commitment to truth and transparency. Ethan, taking advantage of Veronica's desperation, secured a court order to investigate the source of the leaks and the funding network behind the smear campaign. The investigation revealed Veronica's connection to the resentful investors and, more importantly, proof that she was violating the terms of her parole by engaging in criminal activities. The turnaround was swift. Veronica was arrested again, this time for parole violation and for her involvement in a campaign of defamation and harassment. Her backers were also investigated and prosecuted for their role in the scheme. The news of Veronica's arrest brought immense relief to Eleanor. The shadow had finally lifted. The peace she had longed for seemed finally within her reach. Eleanor, Lucas, and Sophie could at last enjoy the life they had built. The Learn and Transform Foundation continued to grow, impacting millions of lives. The Learn and Play company thrived, and the love between Eleanor and Lucas grew stronger every day. Life had taught Eleanor that challenges would never cease, but that resilience, integrity, and love were the most powerful weapons to overcome them. She had found her purpose, her family, and her peace, and as she looked to the future, she knew she was ready for anything life threw at her. She wondered if Veronica's story had finally come to an end, and if the peace she so desperately sought would be lasting. Veronica's arrest marked the end of a turbulent cycle in Eleanor's life. Peace, once a distant ideal, finally settled in. The news of her detention for parole violation and harassment was a relief not just for Eleanor, but for everyone around her. Justice, though delayed, had prevailed. The months that followed were a time of rebuilding and celebration. The Learn and Transform Foundation, free from the shadows of defamation, flourished even more. Eleanor's story of overcoming adversity, Lucas's dedication, and the team's resilience inspired donations and partnerships on a global scale. The foundation's impact on the lives of children in conflict zones and underserved communities became a beacon of hope. The Learn and Play company continued its successful trajectory, remaining at the forefront of educational technology. Eleanor, with her innovative vision, ensured that the company not only generated profits, but also actively contributed to the foundation's mission, allocating a significant portion of its resources to social projects. Lucas, fully recovered from the trauma of captivity, dedicated himself with even more passion to his humanitarian work. His experience made him an even more fervent advocate for education and peace. He and Eleanor formed an unbeatable duo, complementing each other in their passions and purposes. Sophie, now a vibrant and intelligent teenager, was the pride of Eleanor and Lucas. She excelled in school, actively participated in the Foundation's projects, and demonstrated a sense of empathy and justice that moved everyone. Lucas's presence in her life had filled a void, and the family they had built was a haven of love and support. Ethan, the loyal ally, remained Eleanor's right-hand man. His loyalty, intelligence, and friendship were invaluable. He had found his own fulfillment in helping Eleanor build her empire of good, and her happiness was his greatest reward. Richard, in his secluded life, followed the news from afar. He had found a new purpose in organic farming and a simple life. Sophie's visits were the highlight of his weeks, and he strived to be a present and better man. Redemption was a long road, but he was walking it with sincerity. Eleanor's life had turned into a modern fairy tale, but she knew the journey had been arduous. The scars of the past, though healed, served as reminders of the strength she had discovered within herself. Years passed. The Learn and Transform Foundation became one of the largest and most respected humanitarian organizations in the world. Eleanor and Lucas were global figures, recognized for their tireless work for education and peace. One gala evening during an award ceremony for a major humanitarian prize, Eleanor took the stage to receive the honor. The audience, composed of world leaders, philanthropists and activists, gave her a standing ovation. In her speech, Eleanor spoke about the importance of resilience, passion, and the transformative power of education. She thanked Lucas, Sophie, Ethan, and the entire Foundation team. She spoke about the adversities she had faced, the falls and the new beginnings, and how each challenge had made her stronger. "Life is a journey of continuous learning," she said, her voice choked with emotion, "and each of us has the power to transform not only our own lives but also the lives of those around us. No matter how dark the night may seem, the sun always rises, and with it the hope of a new day, a new beginning." At the end of her speech, Eleanor looked out at the audience, her eyes meeting Lucas's, who was smiling with pride. Beside him, Sophie, now a young woman, applauded enthusiastically. And a little further back, Ethan, with a discreet smile, watched the woman he so admired, knowing that her story was a living testament to the power of overcoming. Eleanor's life was proof that even after the greatest storms, it is possible to rebuild, flourish, and inspire. She had found not only success, but true happiness, the kind that is born from authenticity, purpose, and love. And as she looked to the future, she knew the journey would continue, full of new challenges and new opportunities to make a difference. Eleanor's story was a reminder that a true legacy is not built with wealth, but with the positive impact we leave on the world. And so, the narrative of Eleanor, the woman who turned pain into purpose, betrayal into strength, and adversity into inspiration, comes to its end. But her legacy continues to echo, an eternal testament to the power of the human spirit. Eleanor's story, though it reached a climax on that award stage, doesn't end there. Life, after all, is a continuous flow of learning and evolution. The humanitarian award was a recognition, a milestone, but not the final destination. It was, instead, a new beginning, a catalyst for even greater challenges and a deeper impact. The Learn and Transform Foundation, under the leadership of Eleanor and Lucas, expanded its operations to even more remote and complex regions. Lucas's experience in conflict zones and Eleanor's genius in educational technology combined to create innovative solutions, such as offline learning platforms for areas without internet access and training programs for local teachers, empowering them to use technology to overcome educational barriers. Sophie, now a young adult, followed in the footsteps of her mother and Lucas. She graduated with a degree in international relations and joined the foundation, bringing new energy and perspective. Her passion for social justice and her command of technology made her a key player in the organization's global expansion. She was the bridge between generations, the living proof of Eleanor's legacy. Ethan, who had become one of the most respected lawyers in the social sector, continued to protect the interests of the Foundation and Eleanor. He was the legal guardian, the silent strategist who ensured that Eleanor's vision could be realized without bureaucratic or legal obstacles. His love for Eleanor had transformed into a deep and unwavering admiration, and he found his own happiness in seeing her thrive. Richard, in his life in the countryside, had found peace. He became a respected organic farmer, his land a model of sustainability. His relationship with Sophie was solid, built on respect and love. He visited his daughter and Eleanor whenever he could, and their conversations were light, devoid of any resentment. He had, indeed, redeemed himself, finding a genuine purpose far from the ambition that had nearly destroyed him. Eleanor and Lucas's life was a testament that love can flourish even after the greatest adversities. They built a solid family based on shared values and an unwavering commitment to the well-being of others. Lucas's scars, though present, had become symbols of his strength and resilience. On a sunny day, Eleanor, Lucas, and Sophie were in a small village in Africa, inaugurating a new learning center. The children, with their bright eyes, sang and danced, celebrating the arrival of education. Eleanor watched the scene, her heart overflowing with gratitude. Lucas, by her side, took her hand. "Look at this, my love, it was all worth it." Eleanor smiled, her eyes welling up. "Yes, Lucas, it was all worth it." She thought about her journey, from betrayal and downfall to rebuilding and triumph. She thought about the people who had helped her, the lessons she had learned, and the legacy she was building. She had found not only success, but true happiness, the kind that is born from purpose, love, and the ability to make a difference in the world. Eleanor's story was not just about personal overcoming. It was about the power of education, the strength of resilience, and the human capacity to transform pain into a driving force for good. She had proven that even in the darkest moments, the light of hope can shine, guiding the way to a more just and promising future. And so Eleanor's narrative concludes, not with a period, but with an ellipsis, an invitation to the imagination to envision the infinite paths her legacy will continue to forge. Her life became an inspiration, a reminder that each of us has the power to write our own story, to turn adversity into opportunity, and to leave a positive mark on the world. The echo of her journey will continue to resonate, inspiring generations to dream, to fight, and to transform. Eleanor, Lucas, and Sophie's lives unfolded in a rhythm of tireless work and immeasurable rewards. The Learn and Transform Foundation was solidifying its role as a global model for social impact, and the Learn and Play Company continued to innovate, always aligned with its humanitarian mission. However, life, in its unpredictability, had one more chapter in store, one that would test Eleanor's resilience in a different way. Sophie, now, in her early 20s, was a driving force at the foundation. Her energy, her vision, and her ability to connect with new generations were invaluable. She led ambitious projects, expanding the reach of educational technology to marginalized communities and advocating for digital inclusion in international forums. On one of these trips, Sophie met a brilliant young software engineer named Daniel. He worked at an artificial intelligence startup focused on solutions for sustainable development. The connection between them was instant, a mix of mutual admiration and a shared passion for a better world. Eleanor and Lucas watched Sophie and Daniel's relationship blossom with joy and a certain pride. Daniel was a young man of integrity, intelligent, and with a huge heart, qualities they valued deeply. Life went on with new projects, new partnerships, and the constant pursuit of innovation. The foundation was about to launch a global initiative to combat misinformation through digital literacy, a complex and urgent challenge in the information age. It was then that the news arrived, not from an enemy of the past, nor from a new adversary, but from an unexpected source. Richard, Sophie's father, had been diagnosed with a terminal illness. The news struck Eleanor and Sophie like a lightning bolt. Despite all the past hurts, Richard was Sophie's father, and in recent years he had strived to redeem himself. The relationship between him and Sophie had strengthened, and the news of his illness brought a deep sadness. Eleanor, with her usual compassion, decided it was time to leave the past behind once and for all. She and Lucas traveled with Sophie to the small town in the countryside to be by Richard's side in his final days. The reunion was charged with emotion. Richard, weakened by the illness but with a serene gaze, thanked them for being there. He asked Eleanor for forgiveness for all the suffering he had caused, and she, with a lump in her throat, forgave him. The words were few, but the understanding was profound. In the days that followed, Sophie spent hours by her father's side, sharing memories, laughter, and tears. Lucas, with his medical experience, offered comfort and support. Eleanor, for her part, watched the scene, feeling a strange peace. Life had taken much from her, but it had also given her the opportunity to heal old wounds. Richard passed away peacefully, surrounded by the love of his daughter and the presence of Eleanor and Lucas. The funeral was simple but meaningful, attended by the few friends he had made in his new life. Richard's death, though sad, brought a sense of closure for Eleanor. She realized that forgiveness was not just for the other person, but for herself. It was the release of a burden she had carried for years. After the funeral, as Eleanor, Lucas, and Sophie were returning home, Sophie asked a question that surprised everyone. "Mum, Dad Lucas, I've been thinking a lot about my father's legacy. He redeemed himself. He found peace. And I think the foundation can do something to honor that journey." Eleanor and Lucas looked at each other, curious. "I want to create a program within the foundation," Sophie continued, "focused on second chances, on helping people who made mistakes, who served their time, to reintegrate into society through education and entrepreneurship. A program that shows that everyone deserves a chance to start over, to build a new legacy." Eleanor felt a shiver. It was a bold idea, but deeply aligned with the Foundation's values and with Richard's own journey. It was proof that the cycle of pain and revenge could be broken, and that forgiveness and hope could bear unexpected fruit. Lucas smiled, proud. "That's a brilliant idea, Sophie. Your father would be very proud." Eleanor, with tears in her eyes, hugged her daughter. "Yes, sweetie, he would be very proud, and we're going to help you make it a reality." Eleanor's life had been a roller coaster of emotions, of losses and gains, of betrayals and redemptions. But in the end, she had found not only success and love, but also the wisdom that true strength lies in the ability to forgive, to learn from the past, and to build a future where hope and compassion prevail. And alongside her daughter and her husband, she was ready to continue writing the next chapters of this extraordinary journey. The Second Chances program, conceived by Sophie in honor of Richard, quickly became one of the most innovative and impactful initiatives of the Learn and Transform Foundation. Under Sophie's passionate leadership, the Foundation developed educational curricula and mentorship programs for former inmates and individuals in socially vulnerable situations, offering them the tools and support needed to rebuild their lives through education and entrepreneurship. Eleanor and Lucas supported Sophie unconditionally. They saw in the program the materialization of a fundamental principle, the belief in the human capacity for redemption and transformation. Richard's legacy, once stained by mistakes, was now a beacon of hope for many seeking a new beginning. The Foundation continued to grow, expanding its operations to new frontiers and facing increasingly complex challenges. Disinformation, polarization, and the growing digital divide were the new battles to be fought, and Eleanor, Lucas, and Sophie were on the front lines, using technology and education as their most powerful weapons. Ethan, the eternal guardian, continued to watch over the Foundation's interests, ensuring its legal and financial soundness. He had found his own family in the Foundation's team, and with every victory he felt the joy of being part of something bigger. Eleanor's life was a living testament that purpose and passion can turn pain into strength, and adversity into opportunity. She had built an empire of good, a legacy that transcended financial success and was measured by the positive impact on the lives of millions. On a spring day, as Eleanor and Lucas were strolling through their garden, Sophie approached with a radiant smile. "Mom, Dad, Lucas, I have some news." Eleanor and Lucas looked at each other, curious. "Daniel asked me to marry him," Sophie announced, showing a delicate ring on her finger. The news was met with hugs and tears of joy. Eleanor felt a deep emotion. Her daughter, who had been through so many challenges in her childhood, was building her own story of love and purpose. Sophie and Daniel's wedding was a celebration of life, love, and hope. The ceremony, held in a field of flowers, brought together friends, family, and members of the Foundation's team from all over the world. It was an event that symbolized the union of two families, two visions, and two hearts dedicated to making a difference. Eleanor, standing next to Lucas, watched Sophie dance with Daniel, feeling a peace she never thought possible. She had overcome betrayals, losses, threats, and challenges that would have destroyed anyone else. But through it all, she had remained true to her values, her passion, and her purpose. Life, she knew, would continue to present new challenges. But now, she was not alone. She had Lucas, her love and partner, Sophie, her daughter and her legacy, Ethan, her friend and confidant, and a team of dedicated people who shared her vision. The Learn and Transform Foundation, under the leadership of Eleanor, Lucas, and Sophie, would continue to be a beacon of hope in a constantly changing world. The Learn and Play Company, with its innovation and social responsibility, would continue to drive progress. Eleanor's story was not just the story of a woman who overcame adversity. It was the story of how education, resilience, and love can transform lives, build bridges, and create a brighter future for all. And so, the narrative of Eleanor, the woman who turned pain into purpose, betrayal into strength, and adversity into inspiration, concludes not with a period, but with the promise of a continuous future, full of new chapters to be written, new lives to be touched, and new dreams to be realized. Eleanor's legacy was not just an app or a foundation. It was the unwavering belief in the power of the human spirit to transcend, to forgive, and to build a better world. And that belief, she knew, would continue to inspire for generations. Sophie and Daniel's wedding was a day of pure celebration, an oasis of joy amidst the world's complexities. Eleanor, beside Lucas, watched her radiant daughter, feeling a sense of completeness that transcended all the pain and struggles of the past. Life had given her the chance to witness her daughter's happiness, an invaluable gift. The years followed, and the Learn and Transform Foundation, under the joint leadership of Eleanor, Lucas, and Sophie, reached unimaginable heights. The Second Chances program flourished, transforming the lives of thousands who, like Richard, sought an opportunity for redemption. The Learn and Play Company continued to be a pillar of innovation and financial support, ensuring the sustainability of their social projects. Eleanor and Lucas grew old together, their graying hair and intertwined hands testament to a life built on love, purpose, and resilience. They watched Sophie and Daniel become parents, and the joy of being grandparents brought a new dimension to their existence. One autumn afternoon, Eleanor was in her office, reviewing reports from the foundation. The open window brought in a gentle breeze and the smell of damp earth. She smiled as she saw an old photo on her desk, her, Sophie, and Ethan at one of the first Learn and Play events. So much had happened since then. Suddenly, a sharp pain in her chest made her gasp. The pain spread quickly, and Eleanor's vision began to blur. She tried to reach for the phone, but her fingers wouldn't obey. The last thing she saw was the photo, Sophie's smile, Ethan's loyalty. Lucas, who was in a meeting, felt a premonition. He ran to Eleanor's office, finding her collapsed on the floor. His eyes widened in despair. He held her in his arms, calling her name, but the life had already faded from Eleanor's eyes. The news of Eleanor's death reverberated around the world. Leaders, educators, beneficiaries of the foundation, everyone mourned the loss of an extraordinary woman. The funeral was a global event, with messages of condolence pouring in from every corner of the planet. Lucas, Sophie, and Ethan, united by grief, but also by the strength of Eleanor's legacy, stood at the forefront. Lucas, heartbroken, but with the dignity that always characterized him, spoke of the love of his life, his partner, his inspiration. Sophie, her voice choked with emotion, promised to continue her mother's work, honoring her memory and her purpose. Ethan, in a respectful silence, felt the absence of the one who had been his moral compass. Eleanor's loss was a devastating blow, but her spirit remained alive. In every project of the foundation, in every child whose life was transformed, in every person who found a second chance. Her legacy was not just a set of accomplishments, but a philosophy of life, the unwavering belief in the power of education, resilience, and love to change the world. The Learn and Transform Foundation continued its work, now under the leadership of Sophie and Lucas, with Ethan as their closest advisor. Eleanor's dream did not die with her. It became an even brighter flame, fueled by the memory of a woman who dared to dream and who, with her strength and passion, changed the world. Eleanor's life was an epic of overcoming, a testament that even in the greatest adversities, the light of hope can shine, guiding the way to a more just and promising future. She had found her purpose, her family, and her peace, and her legacy would continue to echo, inspiring generations to dream, to fight, and to transform. The end. What an incredible journey, right? We followed Eleanor from rock bottom, witnessed her unbreakable resilience in the face of Richard's betrayal and Veronica's manipulation. We saw her rise with Learn and Play, build an empire of good with the Learn and Transform Foundation, alongside the love of her life, Lucas, and her strong daughter, Sophie. Every chapter was proof that adversity can be the fuel for the greatest transformations. If you were moved, inspired, and connected with Eleanor's story, be sure to show your support. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of our engaging narratives. Hit that like button on this video to help us reach more people who need a dose of inspiration. Comment below what the most powerful moment was for you and what Eleanor's story taught you. And, of course, share this saga with friends and family who also need to believe in the power of overcoming. Want more stories that touch the soul and make us think? Check out the playlist on the left with other incredible narratives we've prepared for you. There's a universe of emotions and lessons waiting for you.